to get us started, Publius, I know there's been a lot of stuff going on. Do you want to talk at all about the LUSD pool and the plans that we have with that?
Sure. So on April 5th, the liquidity stability pool rewards that are native to the liquidity protocol are being halved. There's a yearly halving in the rewards. And in short, in theory at least, there will be lots of LUSD holders looking for alternative sources of yield other than the stability pool after that halving. And the thought is that the silo, particularly if there's an LUSD Bean pool, which just got launched or deployed by Beanstalk Farms this week, whether that would basically attract or potentially it could attract LUSD holders into the silo to provide liquidity against beans. And so the general concept is in the next couple of days, hopefully sometime after the Omniscia audit is published, shortly thereafter, Beanstalk Farms will propose a BIP to add the Bean LUSD LP token for the curve pool to the silo, which would effectively offer silo rewards to LUSD holders. And in that case, that would be a very exciting proof of concept potentially for how the silo really and Beanstalk native rewards that are paid to bean holders that are in the silo. So if you own beans, it's a stable coin, but there's positive carry associated with it. That really does create a positive network effects and symbiotic relationships with other protocols. And the hope is to demonstrate that through the LUSD bean pool. So that's the underlying idea behind it. And obviously, there's no guarantee that the pool will be able to attract a lot of deposits or liquidity, but once there are Beanstalk native rewards being rewarded to the pool, that will be, when things potentially get exciting, if that happens.
Okay, I think that's a great kickoff. Hey, we got J-Dubs. All right, J-Dubs, go ahead.
Hey, y'all. Publius, I've got a question about Stalk. I think I thought I understood it. My head might be a little confused, though. Let's say I've got season 5,000. I invest 10K into the silo. Let's just say it's going through Bean, and so it's one stock, 2 seeds. And then in season 5,001, I do the same thing, and I invest 10,000, and I get an additional 1,000. And then I get additional stock and seeds, respective of the ratio that I invested in the same way. When I draw down on that in the future, given that season 5,000 happened prior to the season before, when someone's leaving their position, and if they don't remove, for example, all of their investment, like all 20K or something like that, how does the protocol pull? Like, how does it decide what stock to take away as I leave the silo? Does that make sense?
So Beanstalk is agnostic as to what assets you withdraw, and the UI is what enforces efficient withdrawals. And so one thing that and there's been a little bit of talk of recently about protocols building on top of Beanstalk. One thing that we'd love for Beanstalk Farms to help develop would be some sort of factory to facilitate other smart contracts to efficiently withdraw the most efficient withdrawals for that contract, if that makes sense. So in short, at the moment, Beanstalk is entirely agnostic. It doesn't have at the smart contract level a way to support efficient withdrawals, but the UI does support for the user withdrawing efficiently, the most recent deposits.
So just to be clear, then, for example, if I'm taking my currency out of the silo itself, when I remove it from the silo, it's taking the stock from the most recent, investment that I make. Maybe I listed the question better. For some reason, I can't speak at all.
Correct. Correct.
Okay, so it's
If
okay.
if you're withdrawing beans, the website will facilitate the withdrawal of the most recent beans. If you're withdrawing Uniswap LP tokens, the website will facilitate the withdrawal of the most recent LP deposit, if that makes sense.
Perfect. That makes sense. Thank you.
And to just build on that, it also burns any, so like when I heard J-Dub's question, I wanted to make the like season 5,000 and then season 10,000, for example. I wanted to separate them further so that we could see the growth that would happen in between. So I guess, yeah, it is a hard one to do sort of verbally, but I guess that if you had two different deposits, maybe let's say 10,000 at an early time and then 10,000 much later, all of the extra stuff that's grown on top of that initial deposit. I'm sorry, let's forget about the second deposit altogether. If you have the first deposit of 10,000 and say that deposit has grown to, it started out as 10,000 stock and it's grown to 20,000 stock, then later when I withdraw 1,000, it should be roughly 2,000. That's 2,000. That's, if I would withdraw 1,000 beans, it should be roughly 2,000 stock that's burned. Is that correct?
If you're withdrawing from that deposit. But let's say that would only apply if you haven't deposited anything more recently and you haven't received any bean seniorage. So if that were the case, you're correct. If you withdrew 10% of your deposit and it had 20,000 stock on top of your deposit, you would forfeit 10% of the stock. That's correct.
But I suppose, let's say there was, I mean, I see what you're saying. If there was no bean seniorage, now if there was, say there was, the initial deposit was 10,000 and there was 1,000 bean seniorage. The initial.
Now, if you withdrew $1,000, the website would facilitate the withdrawal of the 1,000 bean seniorage before you dip into your initial withdrawal.
Understood. Okay. I think a lot of us have deposited and have not withdrawn. So, it's hard to wrap your head around it sometimes. And I think the first thing people think is, oh no, I don't want to burn, which is a very effective mechanism, but I don't want to burn any stock. And so it's good to know which stock you will be burning to some extent. So that's helpful. Okay, we have a question. Next question. From TB. Can Publius explain how generalized minting from Bean 3 curve pool will reduce the necessary volatility to mint beans above peg?
Will reduce. Can you just read?
Yeah, I'll reread it. Yeah. How generalized minting from Bean 3 curve pool will reduce the necessary volatility to mint beans above peg. I think he's saying that Bean won't have to go as far above peg in order for more beans to be minted.
So, couple things here. One, the beauty of having a curve pool with $10 million of liquidity, which was hit today, is that the price doesn't typically go that far above one on either Uniswap or Curve. Or if it does, it's very quickly arbitraged back. Now, there was like a couple 100,000 excess of beans on the Curve pool earlier today and yesterday, and the price did exceed like $1.01. And so, in theory, because Beanstalk is only minting from the Uniswap pool, and there's no conversions at the moment between Curve and Uniswap, there is some friction that exists between the prices between the two pools, and particularly Beanstalk's ability to quickly return the price to its peg on both pools. If you look at the Uniswap pool and the price action on the Uniswap pool, it has continued to oscillate above and below $1. It's certainly spent a lot more time above $1 than below $1 over the past couple of weeks. And that's largely due to the fact that the curve pool continues to hang out above $1. And so in practice, it's unclear exactly what will happen. But if you think about how the pools are related in theory, the fact that Beanstalk isn't really able to return the price of the curve pool to 1 at all, and instead is only able to respond to the price of the Uniswap pool being above 1, which it has been consistently because the curve pool has also been above 1. Once Beanstalk has the ability to factor in the curve pool into its minting schedule, and also there's the ability to convert into the curve pool and between the curve and Uniswap pools. In short, we would expect both the Uniswap and the curve pools to become much more efficient. What that looks like exactly is pretty unclear, but you'd expect conversions in both pools. Like right now, there's a 94,000 excess in curve, but only a 15,000 excess in Uniswap. If someone were to convert on Uniswap, there's still a 94,000 excess on curve, which is going to keep both pools above 1 in practice. Whereas if there's conversions facilitated for both pools, anyone could convert and bring both pools back to peg much more quickly. So it's unclear how exactly the whole system will respond once you have generalized converts live, and how that will affect overall minting. At the moment, you have some sort of trailing effect in place where the fact that the system can't really respond to curve, but the curve excess is causing Uniswap to be at an excess, and that's causing lots of minting, which is causing more people to have demand for the silo is interesting. And it's unclear whether conversions and minting happening in the curve pool as well will cause an increase or decrease in overall minting as a result.
That makes sense. We have a couple more basic questions that we can ask here. Dem Apples, love your name. It's asking, can we talk a bit about what makes the APY and the silo move up or down?
So there are a couple factors. And if you're interested in the complete analysis, there should be a document which you can read on via the silo page. If you click on any of the tooltips over the APY, you can click on the document and read all of the formal specifications for how this is calculated. But in short, the main inputs into the calculation are the liquidity in the pool and the beans that were minted over the time period that the APY covers. So this is, and in fact, not sure, is this a 7-day APY or a 30? This is a 30-day APY listed at the moment. The 30-day APY is a function of the current liquidity in the Uniswap pool. So if the Uniswap pool right now increased 10% in liquidity, the APY that is displayed would also increase by 10%. Now, if the beans that were minted over the past 720 seasons or 30 days, is that 30 days? Yeah, 30 days. Over the past 30 days, if that increases 10% over the next 30 days compared to the previous 30 days, that would result in an increase in the APY of 10% as well. And so the two factors mainly are effectively that would change the APY from season to season is how is the amount of liquidity in the Uniswap pool changed, and how, because that's the minting pool, and then how has the amount of beans that were minted over the previous season compared to the beans that were minted 721 seasons ago, in short. And if the beans that were minted last season are more than the beans that were minted 721 seasons ago, you would expect the bean APY to go up. If the liquidity is increased, you would expect the APY to go up, and vice versa. If the liquidity goes down, you'd expect the APY to go down. And if less beans were minted last season than 721 seasons ago, you would expect the APY to go down. So those are the factors that go into the APY calculation. And again, if you'd like to read it for yourself, it's all linked and available.
Great. We got a question out of Asfi. Thanks, Asfi. Question. If we had generalized minting on, we would have been deleveraging faster. What problems do you foresee if minting logic keeps underestimating actual organic demand?
So this is actually a very interesting theoretical problem, which is, and there's no right answer, and we're only going to get to see this play out one way or another, which is, at the moment, you have this really nice feedback loop where there's a constant excess on 3 curve because the system doesn't respond to the Bean 3 curve pool, which causes the minting on Uniswap to be pretty competitive. And the silo yields have started to increase pretty decently, as has liquidity. And the system is now at all-time high liquidity. And even on Uniswap, we're almost at all-time high liquidity just on Uniswap. Things are starting to accelerate. And so the question is, will the system benefit from having the pool start to mint in curve as well? And you look at the sticker price and you're like, well, right now there's a 94,000 excess in the curve pool. And this is one of the reasons why we feel pretty strongly that you want to have minting and convert go live at the same time. Because if you just have minting but don't have the ability to convert, you're kind of back to where Beanstalk was before BIP7. And that caused, there was too much minting of beans and too much minting of soil before BIP7 because people couldn't convert. And so once you have a minting pool, you've got to have convert live in that minting pool as well. And so once you have, at least if you stick with that logic and you say curve minting and convert go live for the pool at the same time, in short, one would not expect this 100,000 or 200,000 or 300,000 excess in the pool that we've seen over the past couple days to last for a long time, if that makes sense. And for people to be able to convert that back to peg, it's unclear whether that will cause less minting because now there isn't this imbalance in both pools, causing the Uniswap pool to basically always be above peg and mint slowly, or will there just be slightly more sporadic minting where when people add to the 3 curve pool in size, which has been happening, there's a short period of minting because the TWAP is above 1 and the delta B is above 1, and then because it converts, it quickly goes back to 1. So it's very hard to know whether apples to apples, even though Dem Apples asked the last question, it's very hard to know apples to apples whether there will be more minting or less minting, or whether this will expedite the deleveraging or slow it down. But the short answer is Beanstalk is in a very healthy position at the moment, and the fact that it's somewhat ambiguous as to whether going to generalized minting and generalized convert will be better or worse, makes us not, in a huge rush to push it out. In the short term, there's a couple bips that will likely go live before that, including the change in demand for soil that was proposed, the draft that was proposed about a week ago, the Q2 budget, the Bean LUSD silo whitelist BIP. There's a couple things that are in the pipeline before minting and convert, but it's still hopefully going to happen in the next couple weeks.
Okay, I appreciate that explanation. I think we answered Twins fans' question. Ready? I think we're up to date, guys. Floor is open. Ask to speak is disabled. I think you have to try to come up on stage, JPP.
You down with JPP?
Oh, got it. Here, I see you. Hold on, JPP. Show requests. It says invite sent. Here, I'm going to allow requests to everyone. Okay, try it again, JPP. I'm going to dismiss, and then you can try again, JPP. All right, in the meantime, we have a question from TV. What would be the consequence of doing generalized minting but not generalized convert? Trying to understand the concept better.
So again, this is theoretical, but if we go back to what the case was with Beanstalk before BIP7, when you had convert between deposited beans into deposited LP when the price is too high, and from deposited LP to deposited beans when the price was below peg. Basically, there's a major difference between the difference from peg before and after those BIP7 was put in place or implemented. And in short, therefore, it's unclear. Well, it's quite clear based on that, that if you had minting without the convert, that you would continue to see this excess in the curve pool, but the system wouldn't actually be able to respond very well to it. And you may say, from a short-term perspective, well, isn't it better to have Beanstalk start to mint more and more and more? Well, maybe, but in the grand scheme of things, one of our favorite charts to look at more recently is the deposited beans in the silo. And if you look at the deposited beans in the silo, in fact, they're actually starting to decrease pretty quickly. And it's like, how's that possible? There's all these beans being minted to the silo. There's not a lot of withdrawals. How is it the amount of beans in the silo are decreasing by the millions? It was at like 33.5 million at the beginning of March, and now it's at just under 31 million. So how is it that over the course of March, the beans in the silo are decreasing by like 7%? It's because of the convert. And all of these excesses in the Uniswap pool are actually being met with lots of conversions. If you follow the Beanstalk tracker on Telegram or Discord, you can see that there's a ton of conversions. And in fact, that is one of the main reasons why there's the close to all-time high liquidity in the Uniswap pool. That's one of the reasons why the silo APY is increasing. And so the conversions is where both large amounts of stability come from and a high amount of efficiency of converting excess demand into excess liquidity is so important. And if you consider right now, in both pools, we're at almost $25 million of liquidity. And then you consider that the Beanstalk market cap is only $46 million. That's pretty significant in the grand scheme of things. And so while having minting in the curve pool without convert would probably cause excess minting in the short term, it would probably cause excess minting in a way that in the long run would not be the most beneficial to Beanstalk, because there's a nice balance that is very clearly at play, that has been the case since BIP7 went live, where anytime you have excess beans above peg, people are willing to convert, which both reduces the amount of beans that are minted in the short term and returns the bean price to the peg, allowing other people to enter closer to $1, and simultaneously is increasing the liquidity, which again, is really important for the system, both from an APY perspective, that just apples to apples having a higher liquidity improves the APY, but also obviously having a more deep and robust liquidity for the Bean token is really a great proof of concept for Beanstalk. And so having minting and convert going live together, such that there will continue to be a large amount of liquidity added as there's new demand for beans, they go hand in hand. That'll be a really nice way to ensure that there's an elegant, a consistent, slow deleveraging. Whereas, you kind of can print too many beans too quick, and then maybe have a period of time below one once minting once conversions go live, because you minted, a couple million beans in a day, because you didn't have convert, but you had minting, and that might not be optimal in the grand scheme of things. So that would be where, the idea of having minting and convert really go hand in hand.
Publius, I have a question of my own, and then we'll get to Breen. Breen has a great question in the discussion. We'll get to that. I've been wondering this for a long time, but there's some very small deposits. If you look at the contract event spot, or if you ever go to the Uniswap pair and just look at it, sometimes in the contract events, I'll see a really small deposit in the silo, like 4 beans or like 1 bean, less than the cost of gas. I was wondering if you had any sort of guesses or gut feelings as to why that might be the case. And then also a lot of little swaps that might be less than the cost of gas on the Uniswap. And I've always wondered about that, and I've never really been able to get a good answer. I wondered if you had any ideas.
Yeah, I mean, we also always try to click on those to see like what is going on there. A lot of them it's kind of hard to explain, frankly. Uh, some of it seems like bots that are kind of, doing weird stuff. Yeah, it's very hard to explain inefficient behavior, other than it's very clearly inefficient behavior. So, yeah, always interesting to see how the world isn't exactly the most efficient, but no real hypotheses on why exactly that is, other than if you look at the transactions, you can see some of them, particularly the trades, are done by bots. Mostly it's but why they're doing that, it's like, God only knows.
Yeah, I could see that kind of it was programmed a certain way, and then it just, yeah, it's like they made a mistake basically. But it does seem to be happening a decent amount. That's why I wonder. But harm no foul, I suppose. Okay. Now I think Breen had a good question here. Ooh,
Oh, look at that. Publius commented
that.
in the class discussion that the small deposits are sometimes from people who are updating their silo when they have a small amount of farmable beans. Very interesting. The more you know.
Oh, the more you know. Now, is that adding to their gas when they're doing something, or is that sort of a free transaction?
Anytime you interact with a silo, your farmable beans are farmed, and that would be the case. So no extra cost.
Okay, so all right, that makes a lot of sense. Hey, okay, I'm glad I asked. Okay, Breen has a question, and I'm just going to ask the second part, in other words, because I think that it makes more sense. Say I have 1% of the stock supply, which nets me X beans per day. A couple of months pass by, and I now have 0.5% of the stock supply instead. 0.5% of the stock, but with larger mints, yield greater than 1% of the original stock. So in relative terms, you get less, but in absolute terms, you get more.
Well, it depends. Like, that's a very basic algebra problem. So it's like if you have double the minting and half the stock, you get, or half the percentage of stock, you get the same amount of beans.
Yeah, I guess to dig more into probably the spirit of their question, is there ever a situation you could imagine where you'd be where you are, would you imagine the dilution, I guess, to be imagining a consistent amount of beans were being printed, I suppose. And well, it's hard to say. I guess I think that what the spirit of the question is would you ever be in a worse position by just waiting, by depositing and waiting, or would the increased grown stock sort of balance out your dilution? I also understand why it's a hard question to answer.
Got it. So the way the stock system works is as follows. Your grown stock is really designed to create an incentive at the individual level for you not to withdraw your assets from the silo, because there's an individual opportunity cost for withdrawing and redepositing. Separately from that, the fact that your stock grows linearly is designed such that the people that deposited first don't have an excess time advantage over the people that deposited later. So if I deposit now and receive X stock and wait a couple hundred days and now have 3X stock, and today you deposit and receive X stock, and we assume it's the same assets, so the same amount of seeds, in another, if we say the same period of time passes, you'll have 3X and I'll have 5X. And so then you'll have 5X and I'll have 7X. And so over time, those two depositors will even out the time difference or the benefit for being in time earlier, but the individual opportunity cost will increase. Now, there's a whole other axis from this, which is as more people join the silo, you will get diluted. Anyone at any point can deposit, and anytime there's new deposits in and new stock minted, you're getting diluted. So in short, the real dilution comes from the new members of the silo joining. But the thing to realize is the cool thing about new silos of the members joining the silo, that is new demand for beans, which also increases the yield, if that makes sense. So even though in practice you're getting diluted, the dilution also pays you out in real time or very shortly thereafter.
I think what a lot of people, and in personal conversations I've had with people too, they're trying to weigh how much like how much dilution, how much they're going to benefit from the seniorage versus how much the dilution is going to harm them. And it's I think that people want a better understanding of that, but that it's hard to judge. Like a lot of these things are affected by how. Can you just speak a little bit more to that? I feel like if we dig in a little bit more, we'll get more clarity for people.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is dependent on the rate of bean minting at a given period of time, in short. Now, the thing I mean, maybe if we just look in practice over the past couple of weeks, there has been both an increase in the beans that have been minted because of the new demand for the silo and an increase in the liquidity in the pools, which has overall led to an increase in the APYs over the past month. And so in short, even if you've been getting diluted, you've also been getting paid a higher rate of return. So it's the question of how does this play out over longer periods of time is fundamentally related to, well, how much minting do you receive at given points in time, relative to when you were diluted. And so it's a very, very complex problem to actually speculate on without doing some more sophisticated modeling, and have not really spent the time to do that.
And the last factor would be how many people are coming in, depositing a bunch, and then leaving, right? Because those people that stock is burned.
Correct.
Yeah. So would love to see some folks start to create some models, and that might be a fun exercise for people to create models, and people could then critique them. TBIQ.
Hey, what's up? So yeah, I just released kind of like the beta of the Silo APY calculator. And I've got some other things on my plate right now that I'm focusing on before kind of like iterating on it again. It's currently just historical facing, but I do want to start some more like future facing projections that are very like in line with this kind of fundamental question of like you're interested in looking at both the historical aspect of if I deposited at these points in time with these amounts, how much money would I make? But looking into the future, coming up with like a small, easy to understand set of parameters that kind of encode your assumptions about the future growth of Beanstalk, and then having the model play out kind of into the future a little bit. So that is something I want to get around to yet. I haven't thought about it all that much because I'm working on a few different things right now, but it's on my radar. So if anyone's got ideas for that, feel free to throw them my way.
Hell yeah. Wasn't sure if that was ready for prime time, TBIQ, so didn't want to.
So I haven't advertised it super well. I just posted about it in general once, but general's been kind of busy lately, so I'm sure it got missed. We probably want to get it out into like announcements or just kind of advertise it more broadly. Because it's definitely it'll be useful, but it can definitely get better.
I had a lot of fun with it.
CTB and Mod here, so I'm sure they'll reach out to you if they have any questions about getting the word out there.
Cool.
But future, like forward-looking stuff with assumptions would be awesome. I think that'd be really, really exciting. And then I think people could kind of project, with their assumptions, kind of see what. Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, yeah. I'm excited for it. Cool. But yeah, that's it for me.
Okay, we got a little bit more stock and seed questions, but I think this is good. Really getting into the weeds here. This is from Asfi. Broadly, I've struggled with stock and seed math. Here's what I know. I deposit 1,000 bean, it gives me 1,000 stock and 2,000 seeds. Assuming no minting happens, the next season I get 2 stock, right? The same for the following season. Assuming no minting,
The
I
next
get 2
season
more
you
stock.
get 0.2 stock because you get 1/10,000
10,000.
of a stock for every seed.
Right. And for the following season, assuming no minting, I get 2 more stock, 0.2 more stocks. All you have to do, Asfi, is put a decimal in front of it. Okay. From Bean Profit, what's the biggest blocker to Beanstalk growth in the next 6 months?
The biggest growth blocker to Beanstalk. It's got to be access. That right now, there's not easy access to the protocol. The website's not the easiest to navigate. It's not the cleanest. There's not great materials around understanding the protocol. So the protocol itself is in a very healthy spot and will hopefully continue to attract new participants and capital and continue to deleverage. But to really talk about major growth, educational material is probably first and foremost.
Asfi.
Yes. I just wanted to clarify. So I get 2 point. So my balance will be what, 2.2 seeds. I still haven't followed the logic on. I deposit 1,000 bean.
Your balance will then be 1,000.2 stock.
Oh, got it. Okay, so it's a stock. Oh, right. So if you can just run through it one more time, like I deposit 1,000 bean, I get 1,000 stock and 2,000 seed.
Yes.
One season passes and I get 2 stock, right?
0.2 stock.
I get 0.2 stock. And then the following season, I get another 0.2 stock, or I get more than 0.2 stock?
You get 0.2 stock every season forever.
Right. Okay. Got it. That's what I was getting at. Thanks a lot.
Until you withdraw those 1,000 beans, in which case you forfeit all your seeds and all your stock. Now, if there's a new bean mint, and now you receive another 100 beans, those 100 beans receive 100 stock and 200 more seeds. At which point you'll start to receive 0.22 stock every season because you now have more seeds, if that makes sense.
Yes, that part was clear. I think it's that's clear. It's this one's been a bit hard to wrap my head around, but I think it's getting there. Thanks a lot. Really appreciate it.
Oh, Publius, just something to add to that, and I guess checking my own understanding of this. Isn't it like grown stock is also yield bearing? So as you like acquire more grown stock, your stock proportion like increases. So won't that like impact the amount of yield you're getting each season?
So grown stock, which is defined on the website as stock that has grown from your seeds, which is different than farmable stock, which is stock that you've received as interest, right? When you receive those 100 extra beans, as fine your example, you receive 100 extra stock. But set the 2.2 or the 0.22 or the 0.2 stock, that's grown stock. The grown stock from seeds is not yield bearing until you update your silo. And so when you're updating your silo, the main thing that you're doing is actually claiming your grown stock such that your stock from your seeds starts to earn interest. And similarly, if we go back to that example before where you receive 100 bean mint and you receive 100 beans and 200 seeds, those 200 seeds are in practice only start to yield more stock so that your stock every season goes up to 0.22 from 0.2. after you update your silo, because this goes back to basically BIP0 and then the unpause. That's where these two things come from. But so when you update your silo, the two assets that you're actually changing the state of are your grown stock, such that your grown stock starts to earn bean seniorage, and your seeds that you've earned from your bean seniorage, which will then start to yield grown stock.
Gotcha. Yeah, thanks for clarifying that. I think I have a small error in the silo APY calculator because I made a wrong assumption there, but that's helpful.
And this is a perfect example if we go back to Bean Profit's question, like very clearly, there's not good enough documentation and language for people to learn and understand this easily.
Okay, we have a UI suggestion from Jugs. It would be nice if we could input numbers in the UI even when I don't have any token balances to get a quote of sorts. So sort of a paper trading idea. Would be kind of interesting. Do you have any thoughts on that, Publius?
We're not the right people to talk to about this, but I'm sure the front end and the UX team are listening to this. So
sure. What I'd always like to know is how many beans I've earned today, because I'm always like thinking, okay, well, this and that, and multiplying it by what my ownership, and dividing it by 2 of the, I'm always kind of trying to.
You have time for that, Dumpling?
Well, when you wake up in the morning and you go to the Bean bot and you say, it's just fun. It's fun to know how much you're making. So I think that might be a fun addition. Okay. Discussion. I always got time to count my beans.
It's honest work.
That is honest work. So from Asfi. So new seeds only result from new bean mints received, correct?
Well, you receive new
deposit.
Seeds when you deposit assets, and the stock does not yield any seeds. That's correct. You receive new seeds when you receive bean seniorage. So the extra seeds come from when you get your bean seniorage. So when you get paid more beans, you get more stock and more seeds for those beans, because those beans are immediately deposited in the silo. Now, it's unique because unlike a normal bean deposit, which immediately receives seeds which start yielding grown stock, the seeds from your new bean seederage don't yield grown stock until you update your silo.
I just want to chime in again. Sorry for hogging the stage. But yeah, I think this whole conversation we've been having the last few minutes is I really want to make these concepts clear to the community. And I think the Silo APY calculator is a good place to kind of host some of these definitions. So I definitely want to work on kind of the copywriting and how I lay out the descriptions of how all these processes work. And hopefully the graphs will make this very though the descriptions combined with the graphs will give people a better understanding of how these mechanisms work, because it's confusing for pretty much everyone, regardless of how close you are to it, because there's so many things to keep track of.
Be kind of fun if we had the test that went out, that we just, for people who feel like we understand, a lot of this, and then we had a test about all this stuff and see how that could be kind of fun.
Yeah, was someone actually making something like that? I feel like I saw that in a chat somewhere. I didn't know if it was a joke or if someone was serious about that.
Final exam, quarterly exam. That'd be amazing.
There's got to be a mochi test.
Mr. Mochi test. That would be great.
The mochi test is the final boss.
before you can withdraw your beans from the silo, you have to get a certain score.
Proof of mochi.
Yeah, there has to be some sort of role in the Discord, like I've passed the mochi exam.
Okay, there's a lot of support. Support for the mochi test. We had a question about the origin of when initially designing the system. What brought up the bean metaphor? Were you guys walking around, saw a bean farm, and thought, "Hey, that's a great metaphor for a stablecoin credit-based protocol"?
Well, the short answer, it's funny, and we've said something similar previously as people are commenting in the chat. So apologies if this is repeat for some. There's no answer we could give to justify where it came from. We were writing the white paper and needed something to start to fill in, to the draft. And this is like version, 100 drafts before the one that went live. So it's truly like, crap. But we needed a name, and it just hit. It literally just hit. And I was like, all right, we'll still put that in there and use it as a filler. And started to then and it was funny, in that moment, this is now a little bit just, just talking here, just shooting some shit. In the moment, had like the thought, yeah, we're going to have to explain this one day and have no good fucking reason why we went with Beanstalk. And sure enough, over the next couple months, as we continue to build out the protocol and think about, the naming and the verbiage and all the terms in the white paper, the Beanstalk metaphor really worked. And there was just lots of, every time we needed something, there was a term that really lent itself to how the protocol worked. And it all flowed nicely. And, the rest is history.
Okay, floor is open. People want to come up. Also, you can post in the discussion. Okay, from Wonton. Beanstalk enters a massive growth cycle and pays off the whole pod line. With the incentives in the silo, it's easy to see many of these harvests going into the silo. Due to previous soil and weather inefficiencies, could this result in a less than desired amount of centralization, which could be considered unhealthy?
In theory, that is possible. You'd have to look at the distribution of the pod line. And in general, it seems like the pod line is pretty spread out. There are a couple wallets with like 10 million pods, a little bit more than that maybe in a given wallet, but that's at the higher end of things. And so, you consider that the protocol will deleverage, maybe someone has 10 million pods harvest when we're at 100 million or 150 million pods harvesting total. The bean supply is going to be significant such that still represents, a single digit percentage of ownership of the protocol. And there are a couple wallets that currently own a single digit percent of the protocol, and so would expect that to not change. So the short answer is, in general, feel pretty good about the distribution of ownership of the system, and there's obviously the opportunity to buy a huge chunk of Beanstalk, right? You could go out and buy 10 million beans in theory, because now there's so much liquidity, and deposit that in the silo and own a chunk of Beanstalk. But in the grand scheme of things, the ownership of Beanstalk is pretty distributed. And we'd love to see some, more analysis of that. Obviously, there's stuff on the Dune dashboard, but would love to see, some even more analysis on that.
Okay, from eWheel. Outside of revolutionizing digital money, what areas of crypto DeFi excite you these days?
Oh man, that's a loaded question. Zero knowledge proofs are honestly where we get most excited. Can't really speak in an educated fashion about them, but think that that's another thing in the grand scheme of things that it's really a missing piece. Is a missing piece to blockchain-based technology and cryptographic, public and private key cryptographic-based technology. And in short, the ability to do a lot of the stuff that currently you can do in a permissionless way, but also do it in a zero knowledge environment. That's game changing. And then it also has obviously a lot of implications for the efficiency of the chains that support them. So that's where things are really cool, but don't have too much time these days to to do as much homework there as we'd like.
I see Breen typing. So Breen, I'm counting on you. Asfi chimed in. The Bean white paper, there are numerous instances defining when a variable is a real number or integer, or what decimal level it's at, are very intimidating for someone who didn't take math. Same paper minus the extra mathematical caveats may go a long way in driving adoption. Curious to hear if others had similar experience or if anyone is working on a simplified translation of the white paper.
I'm going to guess almost everyone has had a similar experience, and that is, kind of the nature of the beast. Furthermore, rigorously defining the variables isn't necessarily something that other protocols do. And so there's also something to be said for, well, why do it at all? But the goal of the white paper is really to be as complete as possible. And to some extent, there's some things that are just not, in our opinion, worth defining in the white paper. Like, for example, how the binomial estimation works for the sunrise function call reward. Like, it's not substantive to how the protocol works, but want anything that was defined in the white paper to be exactly correct. And ultimately, there's probably absolutely nothing wrong with having a version of the white paper without that, but that doesn't currently exist. Would have a little bit of a question as to what the best way to display the options between the two would be. I don't know who in their right mind would choose the version with the formal definitions, basically. And so that's one of the reasons why it's like, kind of bullying everyone to just ignore them as much as possible. But you can really just read the white paper without, like, you just skip them.
Yeah, certainly some interesting discussion going on in the class discussion. I think that interesting stuff to think about. I know I've seen things explained at like 5 levels of complexity before. There's some interesting videos about that sort of thing. I wonder if we could do the same thing, like as simple as possible, and then a couple of steps up, and then the white paper is the number 5. But as far as which one to present, I think that the ultimate, quote unquote, source of truth needs to be the full white paper. But people have been mentioning the light, a light paper, TB said. Very interesting. Okay, we have from Breen. Do you think the game-like system of Beanstalk and the farming metaphors will be a hindrance for when governments and whatnot evaluate Bean? Or do you think the data, the credit, and how Bean went back to peg even in crazy situations like when the Bean went down to 23 cents will speak for itself?
Yeah, it's very hard to answer this question, frankly, because what does it mean for the government to evaluate Beanstalk? It's like, well, you know, there was a report they put out around eCash, because, now the government wants to do an eCash solution, which this chart that they put out was like, hold on, let me see if I can find it. It's pretty funny. Hold on, you gotta save it. It'll be worth it. This awkward silence will be worth it. Found it. All right, here it comes. Look at this. We can all have a good laugh about this one. So this is how they think about, this is how the government is classifying crypto and money at the moment. Yeah, so just after class, spend a few minutes looking at this chart and enjoying how the government evaluates cryptocurrency and stable coins. So apparently beans are issued by the private sector. So within this framework, very hard to evaluate what they'll make of any of this.
I do love Breen's. Breen just posted the UI and the white paper. Nice balance. I didn't notice the both.
Get you a protocol that can do both.
Great.
Yeah, that's a great point, TBIQ. The government issued is good and private sector is bad. Exactly. What a great chart.
Well, I think we have time for one more question if anyone's gotten one down and wants to hop on stage.
For those listening, we're just reading off this chart. We're not saying the things that are issued by the government are good. We refrain from any official opinion.
Well, I'll take this moment to plug the quarterly stockholders meeting tomorrow in the town hall at 8 p.m. So there'll be a brief
tomorrow, Wednesday at 8 p.m. What time zone?
Yes, tomorrow, Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern time. So there'll be a brief discussion of from all the departments about what's went on in Q1, what we're looking forward to in Q2, and then it'll be open to questions from anyone about the state of Beanstalk Farms and just DAO-wide questions about how things are looking, and then what's on the docket for Q2, and should be a good time had by all. So that's in the events. You can go, you can RSVP for it, and I'll see you there. All right, well, thanks for coming, everyone, and come to next class next week, and you should have Rex back, and this recording will be put out here, I think this evening. So.